So it looks like we've got some interest in the Cleveland Browns quarterback situation. And let me tell you, it's a bit of a mess right now. The Browns seem to be shifting gears, moving away from that initial plan of, just building the entire quarterback room around Deshaun Watson. This shift comes after a pretty rough 3-8 season, and of course Watson suffering that season-ending Achilles injury back in Week 7.
Their initial strategy was definitely all in on Watson. Remember, they got him from the Texans back in 2022, despite all those serious accusations of sexual misconduct that were hanging over him. And then on top of that, they gave him that huge contract, 5 years, fully guaranteed, $230 million.
Yeah, it was a massive gamble, and I think it's safe to say so far it really hasn't paid off. I mean, he served that 11-game suspension in 2022, right? And then showed some flashes in 2023, but then had season-ending shoulder surgery. To be honest, he was struggling in 2024 even before the Achilles injury. It's also worth mentioning that he recently settled another lawsuit, this one from an unnamed plaintiff accusing him of sexual assault from an alleged 2020 incident.
Right. The Browns are in a really tough spot. Watson just hasn't lived up to the expectations at all. But moving on from him is a financial nightmare. His contract has those massive cap hits, $72.9 million in both 2025 and 2026.
Oof, that's a lot of dead money to swallow. So what are their options here?
Well, they're limited for sure, but not completely out of moves. They could look to the draft, potentially even using a high pick on a quarterback to signal that, hey, maybe they're moving on from the Watson era.
Okay. Or they could try and bring in a veteran free agent to compete.
Right, exactly. And there are some interesting names that might hit the market. Sam Darnold's had a career resurgence with the Vikings, and Russell Wilson's still playing at a really high level over in Pittsburgh with the Steelers. Even Justin Fields has shown some serious improvement as a passer with the Steelers.
And there are other experienced quarterbacks out there too, right?
Okay.
Like Jacoby Brissett, he showed he could be a solid game manager back when he was with the Patriots. And then there's Jimmy Garoppolo, who's with the Rams now. Talented guy, but he always seems to be battling injuries.
Oh, for sure. And they could even think about bringing back Jameis Winston. He's actually outperformed Watson statistically this year on just a one-year deal.
It's like a quarterback carousel over there in Cleveland.
Yeah.
What factors do you think they're really going to weigh the most when they're looking at all these options?
Well, you got to think about age potential cost and how well a specific quarterback fits into their system. Every potential candidate brings something different to the table. Some strengths, some weaknesses.
For sure, and the Browns GM has been pretty tight-lipped about their plans. All he's really said is that it's always possible that Watson will play for the team again. They're playing their cards close to their chest.
Which is smart. By not tipping their hand, they maintain leverage in both the trade market and free agency. No one really knows which way they're going to go, and that just adds to the intrigue of this whole situation.
It's got to be one of the most fascinating storylines in the league right now. What's your take on their decision to seemingly move away from Watson after they invested so much in him?
It tells you a lot about where they are. They're facing a tough reality. The Watson gamble didn't pan out the way they hoped. Now they're at a crossroads and forced to deal with the consequences.
So taking all this into account, what do you think is the most logical and strategic move for the Browns at quarterback? They've got the financial limitations, and then you've got Watson's inconsistent play on the field.
It all hinges on how they assess their current roster, their cap situation, and what they think their window of contention really is. Maybe we can break down each potential option, see what makes the most sense for them in the long run.
That sounds like a good plan. Why don't we start with the draft? What are the pros and cons of using a pick on a young quarterback?
Well, the draft's always a high-risk, high-reward situation. If you hit on a franchise quarterback, you've got your guy for the next decade.
But the odds of actually finding that guy are pretty slim, right?
You're absolutely right. And even if you draft a guy with a ton of talent, there's no guarantee he pans out. Look at all the highly touted prospects who have busted in the NFL.
True. You're really just betting on potential, not production.
Exactly. And you can't forget about the development time. A young quarterback isn't going to step in and light the world on fire. They need time to learn the offense, adjust to the speed of the game, and hone their skills.
The long game.
It is, for sure. And there's a lot of uncertainty that comes with it.
So what are the potential upsides of drafting a quarterback then? Why would the Browns even consider going that route?
Well, first and foremost, it's the most cost-effective way to get a quarterback. Rookie contracts are incredibly team-friendly, which gives you a lot of flexibility to build out the rest of your roster.
That makes sense, especially with Watson's contract eating up so much of their cap space.
Exactly. And if you draft the right guy, you could potentially have a franchise quarterback on a cheap deal for a good chunk of time. That's incredibly valuable in today's NFL.
Plus, you can't ignore the excitement and hope that comes with drafting a young quarterback with a lot of upside. It can really energize the fan base and create a feeling that, hey, maybe the future is bright.
You're right. There's a certain allure to the idea of building around a young, talented quarterback, starting with a clean slate, watching him grow and develop into a star.
So let's say the Browns go the draft route. Who are some of the names they should be looking at?
Maybe we can save that conversation for another time. Let's explore some of the other options the Browns have first, like maybe pursuing a veteran free agent.
Okay, good point.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at the free agent market and see what's out there.
All right, let's break down the pros and cons of bringing in a veteran, see what they could bring to the Browns offense. There are certainly some interesting names out there.
So what are the benefits of signing a veteran free agent? What are the advantages there?
The big one is you're getting a proven commodity. You know what you're getting with a veteran quarterback. They've been there, they've done it, they know how to handle the pressure of playing in the NFL.
So you're lowering the risk factor compared to drafting a rookie.
To some degree, yes. You're not betting on potential anymore, you're betting on experience and past performance.
And that could be huge for a team like the Browns that wants to win now.
Exactly. A veteran quarterback can walk in and instantly bring stability and leadership to a team that's been struggling.
And they could even mentor a younger quarterback if the Browns decide to draft one down the line.
Right. A veteran can be a great teacher and role model for a young player learning the ropes.
So signing a veteran free agent sounds like a good move. But what are the potential downsides the Browns need to be aware of?
Well, the biggest one is always cost. Veteran quarterbacks, especially the ones with a good track record, they don't come cheap.
And the Browns aren't exactly swimming in cap space.
That's a major concern. They'd have to get really creative with the finances to make a big signing work.
Plus, there's the age factor, too. Some of the top free agents are getting up there in years. How much do they have left in the tank?
That's a valid point. You have to weigh the risk of signing a quarterback who might be past his prime.
It's about finding that balance right. The Browns need a veteran who can make an impact right away. But they can't overpay for someone who's on the decline.
It's a tough needle to thread, for sure.
So let's talk about some specific veterans who might be available. You mentioned Sam Darnold earlier. What makes him an interesting option for the Browns?
Darnold's always had the talent, but things didn't really click for him early on with the Jets. He seems to have found a system that suits him with the Vikings. He's playing with a lot more confidence. He's still young, and you could argue he has the potential to be a long-term answer.
So potentially a high upside signing.
Definitely, but there's risk there too. He's had some injury issues in the past, and who knows if he can replicate that success he's had in Minnesota if he goes to a new system.
What about Russell Wilson? He's still playing at a high level with the Steelers. Could he be a fit in Cleveland?
Wilson's a fascinating case. He's a proven winner, and he can still sling it. He's got the arm talent to be a top quarterback.
But he's not getting any younger, right?
True, he's definitely in the latter part of his career. The question is, how much longer can he play at this level?
And would he even want to come to Cleveland?
That's another big question mark. He's been with successful franchises his entire career. Would he be willing to join a team that's still trying to figure things out?
It's tough to say. But if the Browns could get him, it would be a huge win.
Oh, absolutely. He'd make them a contender right away.
Okay, what about Justin Fields? He's shown real improvement as a passer over in Pittsburgh. Could he be a target for the Browns?
Fields is an interesting one. He's got the athleticism and arm talent to be a really exciting quarterback in the NFL.
But he's still unproven right.
Yeah, he's only been in the league for a few years, but you can't deny his potential.
So he'd be a bit of a gamble.
He would be, but sometimes the biggest rewards come with the biggest risks.
Let's switch gears a bit. Talk about some of the other veteran quarterbacks who might be out there. What about Jacoby Brissett? What are his strengths and weaknesses as a potential starter for the Browns?
Brissett's a solid, dependable quarterback. He's not going to blow you away with his arm talent or anything, but he makes good decisions and doesn't turn the ball over.
So a safe, steady option.
Yeah, he's not going to win you a ton of games by himself, but he's not going to lose them for you either.
More of a game manager type?
Exactly. He's someone you can trust to execute the game plan.
What about Jimmy Garoppolo? Talented guy, but as we said, he's had a lot of injury problems. Could he be a good fit for the Browns?
Garoppolo is a really good quarterback when he's healthy. He's accurate. He's got a good arm. He's won games in the NFL.
But the key there is when he's healthy.
That's right. He's had a lot of trouble staying on the field.
So a high-risk, high-reward signing.
He could come in and lead them to a Super Bowl, but he could also spend most of the season on IR.
And lastly, let's talk about Jameis Winston. He stepped in for Watson this season and played pretty well. Could the Browns bring him back as the starter?
Winston's an interesting option. He's got the arm and the experience to be a successful starter in this league.
But he's had some ups and downs in his career.
He has. He can be prone to turnovers, and he's not always the most accurate passer.
So, a bit of a wild card.
I think that's a fair assessment. He could be great, but he could also be a liability.
It sounds like the Browns have a lot of options at quarterback.
They do, but that doesn't mean it's going to be an easy decision.
There are a lot of moving parts here.
There are, for sure. It's a complex situation.
So as we wrap up this part of our conversation, what are your final thoughts on the Browns quarterback situation?
Well, they're in a tough spot, no doubt. They made this massive investment in Deshaun Watson, and it hasn't worked out the way they planned. Now they have to figure out how to move forward.
It's a really important moment for the franchise. The decisions they make in the coming months are going to have a huge impact.
Absolutely no question about it. They need to find the right quarterback to lead them into the future.
They have to find a way to balance wanting to win now with setting themselves up for the future.
Right, and then they've got that salary cap situation hanging over their heads.
It's not ideal.
Yeah.
Let's go back to Watson for a minute. Do you think there's any chance they try to trade him?
Man, that would be really tough. With that contract and all the question marks about his future, it would be hard to find a team willing to take on that much money, especially with how he's played recently and all the off-field stuff.
So you're thinking it's more likely they try to make it work with him?
It's hard to say for sure, but given everything that's going on, that seems like the most realistic option.
It's a gamble for sure.
Every option at this point is a gamble in some way.
What about restructuring his contract? Could they do that to free up some cap space?
It's possible, but they'd probably have to push even more guaranteed money into future years, which would make their cap situation even worse down the road.
It's a mess.
Yeah, no doubt.
Let's say they do decide to move on from Watson, whether it's a trade or they just release him. What kind of message would that send to the rest of the league?
I think it would show that the Browns are willing to admit they made a mistake, that they're ready to move on, even if it costs them a lot of money. It would show that they're focused on the long-term future.
It would be a big statement.
It would, and it might make them a more attractive destination for free agents, knowing that the front office is willing to make tough decisions.
So even though it would be expensive to get rid of Watson, there could be some benefits down the line.
Possibly, but it all comes down to how they handle things and what moves they make after that.
It seems like the Browns are at a real turning point. They have to weigh their options carefully and choose the right path.
They do, and they have to do it soon. The more they wait, the fewer options they'll have.
We've covered a lot of ground today. We've looked at the different things the Browns have to think about when making this decision.
We've gone over the pros and cons of every option.
But in the end, it's up to the Browns front office.
One thing's for sure, though. This is a huge moment for the franchise.
Any final thoughts for our listener?
The Browns' quarterback situation is complicated. There are no easy answers. You can make a case for a bunch of different approaches. It's going to be interesting to see which way they go and how it affects their future.
Awesome.
This is a decision that could determine whether they sink or swim as a franchise.
Let's get into some specific scenarios then. What are some paths they might be considering?
Okay, so let's explore some of those paths the Browns could take, and we can analyze what might happen with each choice.
Let's start with the scenario where they decide to stick with Watson. What would that look like?
If they go that route, they're essentially betting on him returning to form, getting back to the level he was at before the injuries, and staying healthy. It's definitely a risky move given how he's played recently and with that huge contract still on the books.
So, if they stick with him, what could they do to help him succeed?
Well, they'd need to surround him with talent, give him a strong supporting cast on both sides of the ball. And they'd need a coaching staff that can help him regain his confidence, help him develop his game even further.
So it would require a pretty big commitment from the entire organization, not just financially, but philosophically too.
Absolutely. It would be a sign that they believe in Watson and that they're willing to put in the resources to help him get back to that top level.
Okay, let's move on to the scenario where they decide to move on from Watson. What options do they have there?
If they go that route, they've got some tough choices to make. They could try to trade him, but finding a team willing to take on that contract is going to be really difficult. They could also just release him, but that would mean a massive dead cap hit.
What would they have to think about when deciding between trading him or releasing him?
The money, obviously. They'd have to compare the financial impact of each option. They'd also have to think about what they could get in return for a trade versus just taking that guaranteed cap hit if they release him.
It's a tough call.
Yeah, there's no easy answer. They need to really look at their cap situation, their roster needs, and what the market for Watson might even be.
Okay, so they decide to move on from Watson. What's the next step?
Well, they got to find his replacement, right? They could look to the draft, try to find a young quarterback with a lot of potential, or they could explore free agency and target a veteran who can come in and stabilize things.
Which approach would be better for them?
I think it depends on their overall plan. If they want to rebuild, the draft makes more sense. If they want to win now, free agency would be the faster way to go.
It's a big decision for them. It could determine the direction of the franchise for years to come.
It's the most important position in football. They have to get it right.
As we wrap things up here, any final thoughts for our listeners?
The Browns are in a tricky spot. But it's not hopeless they've got some options. They just need to be smart, make decisions quickly, and be willing to make tough choices. The next few months are going to be crucial. We'll see how they handle everything.
It's going to be an interesting offseason for the Browns and their fans, that's for sure.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
We'll be keeping a close eye on everything that happens. Until next time, goodbye, and see you in the next video.